Well, good evening, everybody. It's Chris here from the Whistle Stop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta, and I am also the Chris in the Chris and Kerry Show. Kerry is still flat out busy, doing Kerry things, doing father things, which us fathers do. And happy Father's Day to all you fathers out there. And yes, I mean the fathers. Happy Father's Day to all you fathers. We said Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers last month, so fathers get it this month. Anyhow, thank you for joining me again on a Sunday evening. I'm sure everyone has better things to do than look at my built for radio face and listen to me talking about things. But I'm grateful that you're joining us and you're looking for information and you're thinking through what you see going on around you politically, and you're trying to gather as much as you can to make good decisions. We're happy to be a part of that. Like I said last time, I haven't been doing much podcasting because we're crazy busy, but something intriguing is happening in this province, and I want to dig into it a little bit more. And I also am doing everything I can to gather as much knowledge as I can so that I can make good decisions going forward. One of the ways we do that is by talking to each other. It's probably best to actually have a conversation with somebody rather than just accept what other people say about them online. If everybody just believed what 4 people in Alberta said about me online, nobody would talk to me. But that doesn't happen because most of you have 2 brain cells to rub together and you're able to make your own decisions and your own choices, even though we're constantly, propagandized at every turn. So tonight, I asked Cam Davies, the leader of the Republican Party of Alberta, to join me again to continue on our conversation that we had last week. I thought it was really good. Cam had some pretty interesting things to say. Since then, I've attended an event in Three Hills with him, and that was absolutely fantastic. And it seems to me like, if nothing else, Cam and the Republican Party of Alberta are certainly making people think. And better yet, they're giving them options, which we need. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Mr. Cam Davies to the Chris Sans Kerry Show. Thanks for joining me, Cam.
Thanks, Chris. Hopefully one of these days I get to meet Kerry as well. But I appreciate you having me on. And as you mentioned, happy Father's Day to all the fathers. I was quite dismayed but not shocked that the Toronto Star today wanted to remind everyone that on Father's Day we should be especially appreciative of mothers. And you got me thinking that, well, we had Mother's Day, and fathers also deserve recognition on Father's Day. But it was just a reminder of this woke ideology that wants to weaken families. That's really where that comes from, is headlines like that and articles like that. It's just an absolute frontal attack on the foundation of our society.
It is, and thank goodness people are starting to see through this. Especially I consider the whole biological men competing in women's sports. I consider that an attack on women. Like, why is it that we've been historically, we protect women, we cherish them, we do everything we can to make sure that they're taken care of, and then all of a sudden we're willing to throw them to the wolves when it comes to this kind of thing in the name of some weird feminism? Makes no sense to me. And the Father's Day thing, I don't really do much for Father's Day. Mother's Day, of course, at the Whistle Stop, we do stuff. We have free brunch for moms and flowers and stuff kicking around. Father's Day, I don't do much because dads, we work, we take care of our kids, and then we die. That's kind of our thing, right? A little bit different.
Well, and you're absolutely right. I mean, it's long past time we started bringing in a little more common sense into the public discourse. The notion of having to entertain any more than 2 sexes, 2 genders, this flavor of the week, political correctness, woke ideology conversation needs to be firmly rejected by Albertans. And this virtue signaling, putting pronouns in your description, making sure people know you're a he, him, or a she, her. Let's just get back to some basics and common sense here. That you're a gentleman, you're a lady, and you move forward in conversation, treat each other like human beings.
Well, that would be nice. And I think the vast majority of this beautiful province of ours, the vast majority of Albertans, they believe that. The problem is, in the last 15 years, we found ourselves in a situation where we're almost like nervous to speak the truth, because if we say what's true, society is going to attack us for being bigots. You know, like if I say that person dressed up as a woman is a man, the clothes don't make him a woman. All of a sudden, I'm getting attacked. In other parts of the world, they're actually throwing people in jail for that. But it's changing a little bit here, because now we have some very influential people who are starting to speak the truth at very high levels. For instance, did you ever in your lifetime anticipate that the president of the United States would have to declare that there are two sexes, man and woman? Like that it had to be said is telling.
Yeah, and you bring up an interesting point, that fear of speaking truth, whether that's to your friends, your family, your neighbors, politically, that really starts with us as people not caving into that fear and standing up for what we believe. And we can stand for what we believe without being hateful. We don't have to be mean-spirited, but we can stand true to our beliefs and with courage in our convictions, and not bend the knee to what a very small minority of people in our society want us to say or to accept, that just doesn't mesh with our values. And I think that's important. It's that fear that we have to start rejecting. Right.
And there's a difference between being polite and caring. You know, if somebody wants to live their life that way and they want to, I'm going to go on a limb and say pretend to be the opposite sex, I guess I would be polite and refer to them like that. However, don't tell me that I have to think that way. Like nobody's right. going to reprogram me, and don't take my politeness as a sign of weakness that you can influence my thinking.
That's exactly right. Things. We have that phrase in the military. Don't mistake my kindness for weakness.
So yeah, exactly.
And it really, when you talk about standing up for your beliefs, that kind of ties into cancel culture. Because what we also saw over the last 10 years was this cancel culture rearing its head, and really it was emboldened because we stopped standing up for each other. We saw one person get attacked for their beliefs, and then we all kind of backed away, and people didn't want to step up for that person and say, well, I also share those beliefs. Why shouldn't they be allowed to stand by their beliefs, and why should they have to be, forcibly reprogrammed? Like that's, we stop standing up for each other. We let it go way too far, and we have to reverse that course now.
Yeah. And because it went so far, those who are kind of pushing that kind of agenda, it's gone so far, and they become so comfortable in their cemented beliefs now that when we start to push back against it, the response is unreal. I don't know if you watched when young Josh Alexander was in Calgary, and he was standing outside reading a Bible, and these men pretending to be women physically attacked him. Like one of them stuck their hand down his pants. Like one of them punched him. It was all sorts of crazy, just lunatic responses that this minor was receiving for reading a Bible in public. And the result of that was him being arrested by the Calgary City Police and dragged away, and the offenders were left there, totally upside down.
Yeah, we live in a world where when you speak truth, you are vilified, attacked. It brings out. It really brings out. We kind of label it as somebody's triggered, but it's actually more than that. It kind of shows that there's an element of our society that, under any circumstances, will react a certain way when the truth is presented to them, even if it's not even directly impacting them or their lives, or even directed at them. I mean, I can tell you the emails and messages that our party gets just for existing, the vitriol and the hatred expressed from some people has been, and actually towards people who are supporters of our party as well. It's been shocking that there's an element of our society, most of them, deranged socialists. Some of them have been very brave in a sense, maybe because they're not afraid of a repercussion. Maybe they feel to be protected, but sending just absolutely vile and threatening physical violence from their union email addresses.
Wow.
From their publicly funded work email addresses. We have been receiving several death threats from people who feel emboldened, and so of course we have to report those and stay vigilant. But it has created a response from people who have their identity shrouded in absolute hatred for anything that represents freedom and what we stand for in our party. So it's unfortunate, but that's the world we live in.
Yeah, it's a complete absence of critical thought, and it's actions based on emotions and nothing else. And actually, this book, somebody gave me this book. They were at the Whistle Stop Cafe when the 51st state group had a meeting there to talk about why they wanted Alberta to become a 51st state. And the authors of this book, Trump Derangement Syndrome, were there, and they were both psychologists. And when they're U.S. citizens, and as they watched the things with Trump unfolding, or the people around him, and the Trump Derangement Syndrome, that's the title of the book, they realized, like, this is a clinical thing. This is something that can be categorized, studied, and treated, because it's a legit psychological disorder to completely ignore reality and do the things that they were doing because they just don't like that guy. I suppose it's nothing new, but yeah, it's certainly interesting.
No, and it's a psychological phenomena where your identity is based on what you're not instead of what you are.
Right.
And we see an element of our society that very quickly went from, their X handle having a mask emoji, to having a Ukraine flag, to having a Palestinian flag, to having a Canada flag, or all of the above.
I think it's a rainbow this month or something.
A rainbow this month. So yeah. When your identity is based on something that you're not, and then you project, it's very easy to kind of be reprogrammed. And I think that's what our government likes. They like to have a sizable portion of our society that will just regurgitate what's in front of them month to month, and take a position that favors, frankly, tyranny.
The next big thing. They're waiting for the next big thing.
The next big thing.
Yeah. Well, the next big thing for me is an independent Alberta. I believe we're going to get there. I believe that is the first step to repairing some of the societal failings that we've seen in the last 20 years. At least being able to manage things ourselves and protect our rights, specifically our freedom of speech, which we actually don't have in Canada. People don't know that. We have the freedom of thought, religion, and expression, but there's no specific freedom of speech here. And, get to a point where we can have these conversations again, finally.
Well, and that's one of the things with an independent Alberta, that having a constitutional convention and an actual Bill of Rights, not a Bill of Privileges, I think those things have to be firmly enshrined in those documents as a foundation for a new Alberta constitutional republic, which is, as I mentioned last episode, for your viewers who may not have watched it, that's why we chose the name Alberta Republicans, because we do want to see an independent Alberta Republic. similar to, I spent last night reviewing portions of the Constitution that the former Commonwealth of Barbados chose to move towards a constitutional republic, and some of their foundational documents. It's very interesting, kind of where they've drawn from various documents to form their own constitution. But I was at an event in Red Deer the other day. The Rebel, speaking of freedom of speech, have done an amazing job putting together forums where different thought leaders and speakers can articulate their views, especially surrounding Alberta independence. And I think that's a phenomenal place to start as well. But it was interesting to me because they ended with a discussion, let's call it maybe a debate is too strong of a word, between Keith Wilson and David Knight-Legg. And Keith Wilson is a constitutional lawyer. David Knight-Legg, I believe, is a contractor to the current provincial government on a number of international issues and perspectives. And the articulation as to finally why Alberta independence, one was for independence, one was against. And the final argument, someone sent me a clip of it from David Knight-Legg, was that we can't have a referendum because if we have a referendum, it will split the vote and the NDP will win. If we have
my goodness, are you kidding me?
If we have a referendum on independence, it will lead to Naheed Nenshi becoming the premier. That's the new narrative, and I was floored by that. If that's the argument now, because all the math makes sense, whether you want to talk about immigration plan, whether you want to talk about a pension plan, our own tax collection, not having to pay equalization anymore, the math is there as to how Alberta can be a sovereign, prosperous, and independent republic. And so now they've gone right to, if you have an independence referendum, you're going to cause Nenshi to win. So you can't be pro-Alberta first. You just can't do that because Team Orange might be successful if we have a referendum. And I was just shocked. I was just.
Did Keith get a rebuttal to that? I'm curious to know what he would have said.
He must have, and I've got to go hunt it down and find it. So that's something that I'll be looking at maybe later tonight or tomorrow while I'm driving.
I know Keith a little bit, and I can actually picture the look on his face when he was hearing that. But I'm really curious to know what he said. But that's a very, very good segue into this whole idea of vote splitting. This is something that's been a thorn in my side ever since Smith was campaigning for leadership of the UCP. We keep hearing this term vote split, vote split, vote split. And when I hear people say that, I don't hear vote split. I hear be fearful. Be fearful. Don't do or don't support what you believe in because you might have something worse. And it drives me crazy. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's it's troubling from two different perspectives. The first is, as you mentioned, the fear component. It is a tactic to incite fear that isn't based in reality. And so being based in reality challenges the notion that the most recent example that is being cited is the 2015 election, where the NDP came to power. But I think before we go into that, we have to look back historically and look at that same narrative that was used when the PC party became an entity in the late 60s, early 70s. SOCRED used a similar argument against, you can't vote PC because SOCRED is the right way for Alberta, and if you vote PC, you never know what could happen. The same fear narrative was used back then. The same fear narrative in 2008, which I was around for. I was part of the Wild Rose in its early inception prior to Danielle Smith becoming leader later in 2009, 2010. And that same fear narrative was used against the Wild Rose back then by the PCs. So they learned their lesson with the social credit, and they used that same fear narrative that you can't vote Wild Rose because you never know what you're going to get. It was a fear of a different shade, but fear nonetheless. And arguably in 2012, fear is what kept the Wild Rose out of government. They successfully used fear against Wild Rose to retain power, at least for 3 more short years. The 2015 election was fascinating for many reasons. One, as the Wild Rose campaign manager, I had a inside look at kind of what the numbers looked like in a riding by riding basis. And I can tell you that vote splitting only occurred in 2 constituencies. Actual vote splitting, where the vote totals remained relatively the same from 2012 as they did in 2015, and there was a split, an even split, with vote totals and turnout remaining the same. In every other constituency that the NDP won, there wasn't a sudden switch that turned on where 35% of Albertans decided they were overnight socialists. That's not what happened. Instead, Albertans who had traditionally been conservative their whole life had become disgusted by the 44 years of arrogance, entitlement, and corruption under the PC government. And rightfully so. And further compounding that was the cynical, opportunistic move of the floor crossing that left many Albertans on the actual conservative side with the Wild Rose Party feeling betrayed and bitter and deciding, you know what, why even bother? I'm not even going to show up to vote at all. And we look at terrible. We look at every single riding the NDP won in. Conservative voters stayed home. They stayed home because they had no other option to vote for. Wild Rose had been gutted, betrayed. The PCs were even more emboldened, arrogant, and entitled after that betrayal of democracy. And so conservatives lose when we stop being conservative, when we act arrogant, entitled, and corrupt. And we've seen it play out 3 parties now. And so having an option is something that Albertans, I think, we should be embracing instead of being fearful of. And if we had it to do all over again, I think we should have never merged the 2 parties.
Yeah, I agree. And that was another, we need to do this or we'll end up with the NDP again. And the reality was, all we had to do to not have the NDP in again was just get off our asses and go vote. Maybe That's we would have had a strong Wild Rose opposition, or maybe it would have been we would have had to Wild Rose and PCs would have had to work together, to make sure that government could work. But I don't think it would have been what they said it was. But fear was the deciding factor, nonetheless. Pardon me, apathy was the deciding factor, nonetheless. And it seems like this just happens over and over and over again. Now let's talk about where you're running, Olds, Didsbury, Three Hills. So Olds, Didsbury, Three Hills, for those of you that don't know, they are the only, actually it was Olds, Didsbury before, was the only constituency that elected a Alberta independence-minded individual to the legislature, and that was Mr. Gordon Kessler, who I had the opportunity to meet in Three Hills. That was fantastic. So let's, why don't you kind of touch on what the landscape looks like or the political landscape looks like there, and give us an idea of, why people should consider choosing you over the UCP appointee, or anyone else for that matter.
Well, I mean, this particular riding is now it's a riding the size of Belgium, pretty close to the size of Belgium. It's a great constituency. Several dozen towns and hamlets that go from Husley to Hazar, and so talking to Albertans outside of the major cities, you're absolutely right that there's been an awakening that whether that was COVID or even prior to COVID, that bedrock of common sense values still holds true in rural Alberta. There are some exceptions in towns like Olds, where the NDP have tried to and have started to have a presence in. I saw that they got about 85 or so people in a room with Nenshi a few days ago and their NDP candidate. So there's a small cohort of socialists in some of these towns, but they are the extreme minority. They are an extreme minority. The vast majority of voters in this riding have traditional values. They believe in fiscal conservatism. They believe in smaller government. And they believe that when you're given the option of voting for unapologetic conservatism or conservative light, they are going to choose something that represents their values and is unapologetic in those beliefs. And so what we're offering to the voters is exactly that. With a Republican MLA, there's no being told to sit down and shut up when it comes to standing up for Old Tisbury Three Hills and the principles and values that matter to the voters here. There's no being put in the nosebleed section of the UCP benches or being told what to say and how to say it. And part of that party whip apparatus, we believe in free votes in the Republican Party on every issue. And so they'll have a representative if they choose a Republican MLA in this by-election that can fight for their beliefs, their values, what matters to rural Alberta, and a fierce advocate for Alberta First. Every UCP MLA right now is not allowed to do that. They're absolutely not allowed. If you had a UCP MLA come out tomorrow and say they want to move forward a bill in the fall legislative session to press forward with an independence referendum, they would no longer be a UCP MLA the next day. I can guarantee it.
Interesting.
And so if you want a representative that's going to unapologetically talk about Alberta First and speak to Albertans every single day on why Alberta needs to consider going a different route because the status quo isn't working, then I'm asking for your vote in Old Tisbury Three Hills and in Edmonton Ellerslie for Fred Munn, and send a message to Naheed Nenshi that there's Alberta independence voters in Edmonton Strathcona as well.
Man, that would be just glorious. We need to take back some of Edmonton for sure. And the funny thing about that is those NDP voters, they think they have to vote NDP to get what they want, but unless they're voting for the extreme social issues, they really want what a conservative candidate is offering. They want better healthcare, they want better schools, they want more money in the pockets of Albertans, and you can only accomplish those things with fiscal conservatism and responsible governance, which we don't get with the NDP. Now, Cam, here's the burning question. If people choose to support you in that riding, what if the vote is split and we end up with an NDP MLA? What then? What if that happens? Could it happen?
I would say that it's mathematically impossible. The highest vote percentage the NDP have ever gotten in Old Tisbury Three Hills, I believe, was last election, and that was 18%. And so you could take the other 82% and you could cut it right down the middle. In fact, you could cut it three ways. And if you had three conservative candidates splitting the other 82%, the NDP still couldn't win. And so there's never been a better opportunity for the voters in Old Tisbury Three Hills to pick a candidate that most closely aligns with their values and beliefs and is going to fight for the things they want to see advocated for passionately.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this gets even better because right now, even if the UCP, which I've been very supportive of, by the way, and most people know this, I just registered for the AGM today. If they lose one MLA, it's not going to make any kind of difference. it could only possibly make a positive difference for the people of Olds, Didsbury, Three Hills, because like you said, they can have somebody who can freely speak to the issues that are important to them. And
That's
it's
right.
not going to affect the government. It's not going to take the government down. And as a matter of fact, if you are in the legislature and there's a vote on a bill or something like that, if it's a good bill, a conservative bill, you could back the UCP on it. Why wouldn't you, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, if it's going to be in the best interest of Albertans and it aligns with the Republican Party values and principles, then I will absolutely vote for those bills. The voters in the riding have an opportunity to have a independent voice or a backbencher that will not have a voice in the party. And that's just the way the UCP has operated. If you speak up in favor of things that your constituents want, they either silence you or they kick you out, in the case of MLA Guthrie and MLA Sinclair. And they've already had their cabinet shuffle, so you're not getting a minister either way. And so you've got a choice to have a fierce advocate, as Nathan Cooper's former campaign manager just said a few days ago. I am relentless. He's not wrong. Whether you like me or not, I will stick to my guns and I will fight for you.
So I'm trying to think of. I really wanted to throw a curveball and throw something out there that would be detrimental to people choosing to support Republican Party of Alberta candidate, and I'm actually coming up blank. Like, is there a downside? There's got to be a downside.
Well, if you're easily offended, and you don't want Alberta's future and prosperity to be talked about, if you don't want your values to be fought for and protected and our way of life protected, if those are things that really concern you, then maybe you wouldn't want to vote Republican. I've knocked on a few doors. They, the folks that are very much in favor of Naheed Nenshi, they don't like us at all. In fact, we are the scary conservatives, because we're not going to play at being conservative. We're actually going to be conservative, and so they really don't like us. So that's probably the only folks that would feel there's a downside, because they're afraid of the conversation about putting Alberta first being elevated. And it's interesting. There's been a shift since the federal election, and a number of seniors who used to be quite reliable conservative voters have all of a sudden become elbows up. Mark Carney, best thing ever. Give him a shot.
Man, that's strange.
We're seeing the same talking points coming from the UCP. Be patient with Mark Carney. We're going to cut a deal. He'll give us a pipeline, pat us on our head, and we'll go and be happy. I'm not finding very many actual conservatives that believe we should even give Mark Carney a chance. Not many.
Well, all those things would be great if all of those demands, I think it was 10 and now it's 9 or so, I can't remember what it is, but Smith made a bunch of demands of Mark Carney to support national unity. None of them, as you mentioned before, treat the disease. They're all Band-Aids, right? And in my opinion, unless there's going to be a prime minister who advocates for constitutional reform to fix the problems we face here in Alberta, or the West, actually, it won't make much difference. It might make a difference for 2 years or 4 years or 5 years, but certainly it isn't going to fix the problem at all.
Not at all. And I think too often that's what not only federal politicians, but also our provincial politicians seem to look to as a solution. It's let's placate the problem. Let's kick the can down the road a few more years. Let's buy time so that it protects us in our job and our position as political representatives. Kick the can down the road. It'll be somebody else's problem.
That's a good point.
By the time they're out, right? So we see this cycle continuing to play out, and we have to put an end to that, because it's my generation, your kids, grandkids, that are suffering for that. And if we don't say enough is enough, no more kicking the can down the road, No more demands that are just band-aids without addressing the structural problems of Confederation. If no one is serious about talking about that and addressing those problems, there won't be much left to negotiate. Pretty soon, we'll be negotiating whether or not you're even able to apply to buy a home, or
Yeah.
what you can do with your land this month. Those erosions of our freedoms and rights sounds crazy, but that's the direction they want to go. And today we're negotiating about having access to tidewater within Canada. In a few years, who knows what you're going to be negotiating? Who knows what we'll feel like we have to ask for cap in hand to Ottawa and ask for those crumbs from the table of Ottawa, when all along all we had to do was stand up and take a stand and say enough's enough. This system is broken and we need to address it.
Absolutely. You mentioned that people think it's crazy when we say we might have to do these things, like, for instance, refuse an application to buy a home. That could happen. 20 years ago, I would have said people are crazy for saying that the government was going to put a fence and a mask around a church or arrest a pastor for holding a church service. I would have thought people were completely crazy. So if you rewind 20 years, folks, and you put yourselves in your shoes back then, thinking about what's going on right now, now imagine 20 years from now, what you're going to be thinking, what you're going to be seeing and thinking was crazy. On the topic of constitutional reform, I mentioned that unless a prime minister is going to do that, we're not going to fix any of these problems. We actually elected a prime minister who co-authored the firewall letter, which was an instruction manual on how to insulate Alberta from an aggressive federal government, an intrusive federal government. And that was Stephen Harper. We elected him with a very, very clear mandate, clear majority. And I actually can't remember, Cam, how many of those things did he do?
To my knowledge, the only two things that were ever addressed in the firewall letter was the ending of the Wheat Board, which a good friend of ours went to jail over, former MLA.
Yes, my friend Rick.
Rick Strankman. And so the ending of the Wheat Board. And then I put an asterisk next to this one, the ending of the long gun registry, because as we all know, it didn't really end. They just stopped forcing people to voluntarily give their information. They never got rid of the data. We all know that after looking at the High River floods, they knew exactly where to go to seize legally owned firearms. And so, to my knowledge, those are the only two things that were actually accomplished. There were a number of failures in relation to stacking the Senate preemptively, changing anything constitutionally. And there's always a political calculus to it. And you talk about merging the two parties. I think federally, one of the things that ought to have never happened, it was a bit before my time. I was a young guy at the time, but the merging of the Reform and PC parties was also a mistake.
Yep.
And I think the mistakes were made on both sides. I think the Reform Party should have never become a national party. They should have probably stayed to Western regions and formed a bloc style voting base in Western provinces, and kind of had that PC Reform coalition. But who knows how history might have gone if that had taken place. Instead, what we got in a merger, the formation of the CPC, was a Federalist Party that was beholden yet again to Quebec and Ontario and the Maritimes for votes, often neglecting the West. And that's what we have yet again in the federal Conservatives. I've been a federal Conservative my whole life. I've got thank you, Volunteer of the Year, thank you appreciations from Stephen Harper and others, and was heavily involved in several dozen MPs getting elected, flipping Liberal seats, even in this last election, helping Liberals flip seats, and then flipping seats away from the Liberals, I should say. I have to be careful. But
yeah, that's going to be a soundbite.
Yeah, that's okay. They throw whatever they want at me. It doesn't matter to me.
Mm-hmm.
I know where I stand, and I've been a lifelong Conservative, and I've made a lot of Liberals lose their seats, and I think that's something that you can be proud of. And so when we look at that, and then we look at this last federal election, and we had a Conservative Party that made it very clear that they would do nothing to touch equalization.
Yeah.
That was a big concern. It was like, well, okay, we're not going to stand up against mass immigration. We're not going to change equalization. And then a few weeks ago, they just had a vote in Parliament it was actually unanimous. There wasn't a single MP that voted against protecting supply management.
Unreal.
So it's frustrating to see, but the reality is, without a Western representation federally, and the system just simply doesn't allow for it, that the system is broken, and that falls down to the provincial level now, where we're at, to make a stand and make a difference.
I agree. You know, it blew my mind that I listened to Pierre Poilievre say that he wasn't going to touch equalization. He said that Alberta should stay on the Canada Pension Plan. It was better for Albertans, and a couple other things I can't remember right now, and filled rallies here in Alberta. I never understood why. I didn't go to one. I probably would have voted for my incumbent PC, Blaine Calkins, just because I know him and I like the guy. I believe he's a good man, knowing full well that it's not going to change anything for Alberta. But yeah, that really, it was interesting to watch how people can be so excited about something that's not going to do really much for them at all. There's a good question that came up here. Let me just find it. So let's imagine for a moment that you have just been elected to the Legislature of Alberta, Legislative Assembly of Alberta, and you're getting sworn in. Now, as you know, our MLAs and any government employee, pretty much, they swear an oath to the Crown. Now, they don't swear an oath to the people of Alberta, and then this is all across Canada. Now, Quebec has recently just had a vote in their legislature to completely remove themselves from all things Crown.
Yes,
and we have two MLAs in this province right now who added and the people of Alberta to their oath. What do you think about the oath to the Crown that our MLAs, RCMP, military take?
Well, I can tell you that when I served in the U.S. military, I swore an oath to defend and protect not the president, not a monarch, not a politician, but I swore an oath to defend and protect the values enshrined in the Constitution and to protect those values. And I would be more than happy to swear an oath to protect and defend an Alberta Constitution and advocate for the upholding of an actual Bill of Rights and a Constitution for this province, and to represent the people, not the Crown, and not a politician.
Now, do you know much about that, or is that something that someone is able to do, or is it do they try and make you say a specific oath? How does it work?
Well, it would be interesting to see what comes out of the Quebec legislation, and I suspect they won't get much pushback. So we might be in a situation yet again where it's okay for Quebec, but if they want to give any pushback here, then that might be a fruitful conversation. That no, I plan on representing the people, not the Crown.
That would be amazing, and that's one of the problems that I see with our country. And I didn't know this until my issues around the COVID restrictions and my fight against the government. I kind of had this idea, I guess, watching American TV, that police officers were there to serve and protect. Well, ours really aren't. They do, because they're mostly good people and they want to do that, but they have an oath to uphold the law and serve the Crown. And if the Crown is being government, is doing something that is against the will of the people, the people that are supposed to protect us are working for them. And we really have no one. As a matter of fact, in Canada, I didn't know this until recently either, but you're not even allowed to have a toothpick in your pocket if your intention with that toothpick is to use it to defend yourself. You're not allowed to have anything with the intention of defending yourself with it, whether it's a gun or a knife or anything, a bat or whatever. It makes absolutely no sense. You know, in the United States, they specifically say the people have the right to a well-armed militia to protect themselves if the government becomes tyrannical. That's a constitutional issue in the United States. And in Canada, we had 4 men who dared to say that they would defend peaceful protesters if police used violence against them, and they went to jail for like 3 years.
They're still in jail.
There's two still in jail. Yeah, that's the difference between a republic and a democracy like in Canada.
Yeah, the good order and peace and good order, the viewpoint that comes from the crown and by extension of the crown, a prime minister, is deeply flawed, because that view that you have the right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, if that's a right, it can't be taken away from you. That's not something that the crown can give you. That's a right that you have to live as a free citizen and to express your beliefs, your freedom of speech, your freedom of association, all of those freedoms that were trampled on during COVID. And it's not so much that they were trampled on legally, because we actually don't have those rights. Those aren't rights that we have here in Alberta. And there's a lot of legal argumentation over that, but the fact that the charter, there's not been a lot of discussion on exactly how weak the charter is. Most of it was thrown up in the air during COVID. Most of it.
Yeah. So hey, Cork, the government's breaking the law. They're harming me. It's okay. They can break the law because we're scared of this. There's that fear again, right? So how would an independent Republic of Alberta fix these things? I mean, it wouldn't happen overnight, right?
Well, I mean,
or could it?
Well, as soon as we could have a constitutional convention, and that would involve representative democracy and surrounding a constitutional framework where Albertans could fill in the gaps of what they would like to see in an independent constitutional republic, and enshrining in a Bill of Rights and a constitution how we want to see ourselves, how we want to govern ourselves, and what does an independent Alberta actually look like. And so that has to come from the people.
Yeah, a constitution, folks, for you that might not know this, in my opinion, it's a set of rules, or it's an agreement of the people how they're going to peacefully coexist. Because when you get a whole bunch of people together, obviously you have to have some rules and structure and agree to live by some certain rules to coexist. But that's what it is. Ours didn't come from the people. It came from British Parliament. And it came from British Parliament in such a way that they could make sure that their colony here in Canada was peaceful, orderly, and had good government so that they could continue to benefit. It's a completely different thing than the United States. The United States abandoned that over a 2% tax and fought a bloody war for their independence so they could self-determine, right?
And further to that, Chris, I mean, there's 30 plus nations now that were members of the Commonwealth that have chosen a constitutional republic as well. It's a form of government that does put separations of power and power back into the hands of the people instead of a singular quasi-elected official or a monarch. And so it is a preferred form of government. Is it perfect? No, it's not. But it is far superior to the form of government that we're currently governed by.
Yeah, monarchy is great if you have a perfect king. Other than that, it's not the great. You're subject to the whims of man at that point.
And I've never met a perfect human, including myself. So,
no, me neither. So our one of the things that keeps coming up in our our podcasts and in conversations, and I actually heard a story about one from my friend Corey Morgan at the Rebel News event. There's a lot of people who believe that none of this is even real. Canada's not a country. They've been kind of captivated by this idea that there was some technical wrongdoings in the 30s. The Crown pulled some shady things, and they just say, well, none of this is real anyway. It's all fake. It's just a corporation. I don't quite understand how any of that is any kind of a solution. But do you have any thoughts on that? Like, what would you say to those people?
I don't pretend to understand the ins and outs of that kind of information on what happened in the 30s or what didn't happen. I don't know enough about that, but what I do know is that Albertans never voted to join Confederation.
True.
We were thrust into Confederation. We didn't have a choice, and maybe that should be a ballot question to Albertans. Maybe we reframe the whole discussion. We never joined Canada. We were created by Canada. And
at a time when we traded mostly with the United States and kind of were more
right.
like U.S. citizens than Canadian.
That's exactly right. So maybe we flip the whole question on its head, and we have a referendum on: do we want to join Canada? Yes or no? I can tell you how that vote would go.
Yeah,
Right?
That's a question we ask at APP meetings all the time. If Alberta were an independent nation and you were asked to join Confederation under the current terms, would you say yes? And it's always a resounding no, because the terms suck.
Right. That's right. So in relation to how we look at various legislation that was passed, whether it's 1905 or 1931 or any of that, we have to live in the reality of the situation we find ourselves in today, which is the vast majority of Albertans, including myself, don't know all of the ins and outs of what happened in 1905 or 1931. What they know right now is that Alberta is a province within Canada, and that a mechanism to change that is a vote on an expression to no longer be part of Canada. And what follows that expression, that plurality of voices that say we want to be independent and free, what follows that is international recognition, no longer following under the Supreme Court of Canada or Canadian laws, and building our own institutions, our own form of government, and engaging in our own trade relationships. And independence doesn't mean isolation. I was happy to see the of all people, the NDP had a poll in Saskatchewan. I don't think they liked the result of it, but they had to post it anyways. And it was 40% in favor of Saskatchewan independence. And
wow.
So I got a chuckle out of that, because I don't think that was the result they thought they would get by commissioning a public survey. And so 40% of Saskatchewan, without a campaign, wants to leave. I think if you polled northern British Columbia, there's a significant number of northern British Columbians that would be very excited to no longer be tied down to the socialist government in Victoria. And so independence doesn't mean isolation. We've got a lot of friends in northern BC and Saskatchewan, and who knows what the future could hold for an Alberta Republic that may have a few friends tag along.
Would it be fair to say that even though some of the points that people make regarding the pseudo confederation argument or the myth is Canada argument, many of the points might be correct, or might be real, but the probability of anything changing based on that is slim to none. The reason I say that is because even if things weren't done perfectly according to whatever law people want to believe in today, the reality is our government and society at large can enforce the idea that the structure we're in is real.
Correct.
That means they have the courts, they have the police, they have the judges, they have the lawyers, they have the politicians, all of which work together on the basis that this is all real. And I don't see any way of fixing that except through enough people creating this huge parade of independence and pursuing it, period, regardless of which path you believe Canada took to get where it is now.
No, you're absolutely correct. Their perception through the courts has become our reality. And again, why would we want to put this in the hands of lawyers in Canadian courts? The judges, by and large, are predominantly Liberal appointees. Why would we want to go that route? I'm not sure that it would be productive. When we have an alternative route that puts the question in the hands of the people, and then from the hands of the people, it elevates it to international recognition and takes us out of the Canadian Supreme Court equation entirely.
Yeah, and to answer Nikki's question, he says, so Canada's own documents are fraud. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Personally, I don't care. I believe in a free and independent Alberta, and I want Alberta to be removed from anything to do with that. And I want us to chart our own course. I want us to have our own constitution. I want us to have our own Bill of Rights. I want us to have our own government structure, period, regardless of what anyone else did. And in this case, at this time, it's within our reach. We could finally do this for real.
And really what needs to happen, Chris, and to your audience, before we even get to that referendum, there's nothing stopping this current provincial government from ripping the Band-Aid off, doing the right thing. You know, every leadership candidate just about in 2022 for the UCP said what a great idea the pension plan was. The numbers made sense. And they've seemingly, executed a failure to launch strategy with the APP. And what's worse than that, with the pension plan, is they've let the NDP run with the narrative, and they have fear-mongered so many seniors into thinking that they would lose their pensions, that a pension plan can't work, and therefore Alberta can never become independent because they'll lose their pensions. That is nothing short of malicious harm to the independence movement perpetrated by the UCP government.
Yeah, it's total lies. And this is from people who know specifically that it would be, under our current constitution, it is completely illegal, completely forbidden for a province to implement any pension plan unless it's equal to or better than the current CPP. Now, the bar is very low there. We could easily do that. But anyone who's telling you, and especially, the NDP running those radio ads, I don't know if you heard them, Cam, but they were running radio ads about it. The UCP stealing your pension, Danielle Smith selling hospitals to the Chinese, all sorts of malarkey. They know that it would be impossible for us to have a pension plan that's not as good as the Canada pension plan. And yet they say it.
So where was the counter campaign to sell
exactly
this amazing idea? Like, when you let the socialists have the megaphone and you don't counter that narrative, you see great ideas go to the woodpile, and that's what we've done. The Alberta pension plan is an amazing idea, not only for seniors, but also for young workers. And the fact that we've had no action on it has really hindered the Alberta sovereignty movement even. And so what we would like to see is, on the path to a referendum, give Ottawa all the opportunities to tell us exactly how they feel about us. If they
here comes that beautiful rural Alberta internet again.
Oh, here you go. I was going to say, if they fight us on a pension plan, if they fight us on a police force, if they fight us on our own immigration, we have to stop mass immigration, and Alberta needs to immediately have our own immigration plan. And the Alberta government should take a page out of Quebec's book and immediately create a ministry of assimilation and integration.
Yep, exactly. Hold on a sec, Cam. I'm just going to put you to the back and bring you out. Your video went away for some reason. Let me see if I can fix it. No, you might have to, I don't know, your camera shut off there for some reason.
Is that better?
Ah, there you are. Yep.
There we go.
Much better. Much better. You're right. I was pissed when the UCP dropped the ball on that because I was really excited to see that they were talking about it. Like, this is going to be great. The numbers don't
Yes.
lie. The LifeWorks report showed all of the math, and math is a universal language. And I knew that if they could legislate it like that, it's not a constitutional issue. It's well within our purview as a province. And you know what would have happened? We would have started seeing results right before the next provincial election.
Absolutely.
But what they've done now, like you said, they threw the NDP that bone, they let them run with it, and now it's turned into a huge fiasco. What would you do, Cam? Let's say next week you somehow win a bunch of by-elections, not next week, next month, and you're a majority government and you can pass 5 bills immediately. What would those 5 bills be, and what would they do for the province?
We would immediately begin on an Alberta pension plan. We would enact an Alberta police force. We would begin collecting our own taxes. We would immediately begin our own made in Alberta immigration that limits immigration to areas of Alberta needs first, and ensuring that we have adequate integration and assimilation programs. Further to that, we would schedule a legislatively binding referendum on Alberta's independence. And that puts Ottawa on notice. If Ottawa decides not to make any constitutional changes or reform, that puts Alberta in equal standing in Confederation with equalization, the Senate, parliamentary distribution, then on the road to that referendum, I do believe that the majority of Albertans would decide that there's no reason further to stay in this abusive, toxic relationship. And so those would be the 5 things we would do immediately: is prepare for the eventuality that Ottawa does not want Alberta to be an equal partner in Confederation. They never have, they never will. And so we need to immediately begin preparing for that. Right now, the UCP could have a ministry dedicated to preparing for an independent Alberta.
Mm-hmm.
It could do that, right? And it needs to be done. And so, we have a by-election next month, and I'm just one voice, but those are things that I would be advocating for, both in and outside the legislature, that the UCP needs to be doing those things.
And those are all things, except for the referendum on independence. I mean, I want it anyway, but those are all things that I believed that our current provincial administration would do. They had a mandate to do it. We've been talking about it in conservative circles ever since, like even before Jason Kenney. These are things that we talked about and things that we wanted to see our province do. And they haven't been done, which is, it's a little upsetting. But anyway, I like where you're going with that. And you're right. Those are things that we should be doing anyway. They're all things we need to do to prepare to be an independent nation unto ourselves. Another question that comes up, actually it's more of a statement, is Ottawa and Canada will never let us leave because in order for us to leave, under the Clarity Act, we need the constitutional amendment criteria met. For instance, 7 out of 10 provinces representing 70% population, Supreme Court majority, Senate majority, all those things, parliamentary majority. What's your comment on that, Cam?
I reject the premise of the Clarity Act. It's never been tested. What is clear is that will of the people, combined with international recognition, no longer place us under the confines of Canadian legislation or the Supreme Court.
I agree. The only difference is, my view on this is, sure, the Clarity Act is supposed to outline a path to secession. The question is, would the federal government and the other provinces respect that? And, we're talking about wanting an independent nation, an independent Alberta. If Canada and the provinces came back and said, sorry, Alberta, but your 70% isn't a clear enough majority, and your question do you wish that Alberta become its own nation and cease to be a province of Canada, question isn't clear enough, and therefore you can't leave, my answer would be Alberta unilaterally declares its independence. And I can tell you right now that we would have instant recognition from the United States, and that would remove us completely from the rules of the Constitution. So it's almost a moot point. We're talking about being independent. We want to leave the relationship. We're not going to ask permission.
Yeah. So let me ask you this though, Chris, because this is where the political side actually matters. If we had a referendum and and Ottawa chose not to recognize it, let's say it's at 70%, they chose not to recognize it. In order to make a unilateral declaration of independence, that has to come from our elected legislative assembly.
Yes.
How many UCP MLAs right now do you believe would vote in favor of a unilateral declaration of independence?
In an open vote, I believe probably 3/4. In a party towing line vote, probably less than a third.
Yeah. And that simply isn't enough. It's just not simply enough. And so this is the conundrum we find ourselves in, that without significant external pressure, these MLAs, they have nothing to fear from within the party. And so this has exposed the need for perhaps a conservative Republican coalition in the future, where a Republican part of the coalition can make it clear to the UCP part of the coalition, if the will of the people is 50% plus one, then it has to be respected, or we pull out of the coalition and we force it to election.
Here's an interesting question. Do you think that in our pursuit of independence, it's prudent that we continue to be involved as members of the UCP and try and make changes there so when this issue comes up, it's more likely to succeed?
So there's been a lot of conversation about making changes from within, and I've seen how that plays out. It's a significant uphill battle. There were very few changes to the constitution of the party last AGM. And that's because it does take that 75% plus threshold to make those changes.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of those changes would have to be at this year's AGM, which, as rumors have it, the current UCP government is planning an election with an election day to fall the Monday just prior to Thanksgiving. And so they're looking at having a snap election, and we are actively preparing for that possibility. But I would just encourage UCP members, they ought to push back on that. It's a cynical move, and voters in Alberta don't reward snap elections like that. They really don't.
Yeah, we didn't like it when it happened federally, and we don't like it when it happens provincially either.
Yeah.
At all.
So just because you're polling, somewhat well in the polls, voters expect you to finish your term and have a vote, a fixed election date, which is legislative. It probably isn't worth the paper it's written on, but voters expect you to adhere to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, saying, changes from within, I don't know that that's something that sends that sort of a message, because the rules within a party are easily bent and manipulated to suit those at the top in most cases.
Mm-hmm. Did you see the video of Danielle Smith at the Bonnyville Cold Lake UCP Leaders Dinner, where where Mitch asked the crowd something like, "How many of you want to see an independent Alberta?" And the crowd erupts in cheers and clapping. And then Danielle asked, how many people, in her usual upbeat way, how many people want to have Canada remain, or Alberta remain in a strong Canada and with a better deal or whatever. And it was like booze.
Wow.
BOOS. Yeah. From the
Wow.
most popular premier we've had, seemingly.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like in spite of hearing that, in spite of seeing the polling, that I've heard as high as 70% of UCP voters want to see Alberta independence, in spite of the vast majority of Albertan conservatives agreeing with Alberta independence. It seems like the UCP leadership and probably a large segment of cabinet, which happen to be COVID Kenny cabinet folks that are still not only kept around but elevated. It's likely that there's still significant resistance to an Alberta first government. They ran on it, and that's the problem, right? They ran on a sovereignty,
Right.
with a sovereignty in Alberta, and then it immediately changed to a sovereignty within United Canada. And I would challenge your viewers to think of one example of how sovereignty in Alberta has been improved since 2022.
I'm going to ask you to put on your political, I don't know what you would call it, political worker hat for a second. Why would an administration do that? Why would you campaign on those things and then fight it every step of the way? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, it comes from a place of arrogance. If you have a binary choice, if your only two options are Team Orange or Team Blue, then it's very easy to say, well, Chris, I'll give you something, and then I get your vote, and then I'm elected, and then I don't have to do that, because what other alternative do you have? Who else are you going to vote for, Chris? Well, the Republican Party of Alberta is changing that. If you make promises, you better keep them. If you're elected as a Conservative, you better govern that way, because now there's a new choice. And UCP voters who feel that they were duped or hoodwinked or haven't gotten the things they were promised in 2022 or 2023 elections, they have an option now. They have a choice. And our party will not only hold the UCP accountable for their promises, but we will pull them further and further to the right and towards Alberta independence.
How are you going to make sure that your party holds your party accountable? How will you make sure that your MLAs are doing exactly what you just described?
Well, as I mentioned, we are going to have free votes with our MLAs, but our MLAs are elected to adhere to the principles and policies that come from the members. Not the Jason Kenney, the leader holds the pen. It's the members that dictate the party direction. And our hope is that maybe we have a coalition government in the near future, but that very soon we are an independent republic with a new form of government, where the legislative elected officials are completely separate from the executive branch. The premier can no longer tell MLAs how to vote and what to vote on and what they have to say and what they can't do. Legislative members should be free to advocate for their constituents. The leader of a party, or the premier or the prime minister or the governor or the president, whatever you want to call it, has to be an entirely separate office with no dictatorial-like control over elected officials that were elected to represent their constituents. Mm-hmm. And so that accountability comes from, first, separation of power. You have to separate the power. You have to put in guardrails so that representatives elected by the people can represent the people. And then the people have to hold those representatives accountable. But the first step in being able to do that is separating the executive from the legislative branches.
Yeah, bingo. I remember as a kid in elementary school being taught how the legislative, executive, and judicial branches are separate and we're in the middle to be protected, and they balance everything out. And that is not true at all. Not even a little bit. I mean, we have a prime minister who appoints Supreme Court judges. We have in Alberta, we have the Minister of Justice is the Solicitor General and the Attorney General, like representing the legal matters of the government and the people. It cannot work, and it doesn't work, and I've felt it. I've felt it in my own personal life.
Doesn't work.
Yeah, that's really good. And do you recall? I believe it was in Wetaskiwin. The people in that constituency, I think they actually sued their MLA because he made, or MP or something, because he made promises and didn't deliver, and they took him to court, and he won. The judge said, well, they basically have no legal requirement to fulfill any of the things they tell you they're going to do. Maybe we could change that in an independent Republic of Alberta.
Well, I think we certainly should, and not to mention recall legislation that's completely out of sync with reality, and the bar is so high that to execute proper recall is very challenging here.
Sorry, I'm also the producer, so I have to read the comments at the same time. I like this comment. This is from Robert. Robert says, Alberta, you're the last hope for freedom in Canada. Alberta, you have the funds to be independent, strong, if we become more fiscally responsible. Strong connections in the oil world, taking a page from John Diefenbaker rally around our flag. We must. Years ago, Quebec almost voted to assimilate with France. You guys are doing a great job, but time for action is now. Some very good points. Thank you.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And the flag that we have to rally around is the Alberta flag. I would encourage your viewers to start a trend. Start a trend. Take down your Canadian flags and just fly the Alberta flag. That's the only flag that should be flown on any of our government buildings. Every virtue signaling flavor of the month flag needs to be taken down, and hold your elected officials responsible. The ones that are out there parading different, virtue signaling flavor of the month flags, pressure them. Let them know that if they don't start representing the people, then you've got a new option. You can vote for a party that's going to represent your values and your beliefs, and fly the Alberta flag proudly. Canada doesn't represent us anymore as Albertans. It hasn't for quite some time. What it meant to be a proud Canadian no longer exists. If you ask yourself truly, what does it mean to be a Canadian? I think you'll come up short. But what it means to be an Albertan is something entirely different. A place and a people with opportunity, prosperity, Western traditions and values. We embrace hard work, risk, and opportunity. And I think we have a lot to be proud of as Albertans, and we should embrace that culture and that heritage.
I agree. And that's why at the Whistle Stop Cafe this July 1st long weekend, you are going to see more Alberta flags than you have ever seen. I've been ordering flags nonstop for like 2 weeks, and they're going to be everywhere. Actually, there's going to be a lot of Alberta patriots there. I think you're going to join us too, I think, Cam, aren't you?
I will be.
Yeah, so you'll be there. Our friend Corey Morgan will be there, who is a fantastic authority on all things Alberta independence. He's been there, done that, and he has a very good insight into this. We're even going to have some an international visitor. Pardon me, two. One international visitor who is a very strong patriot for her country, who believes that her country should put her country first, and she's taken a lot of lumps in the news for it. Her name's Christine Anderson. She's a member of European Parliament, and her reason for being in European Parliament is because she wants Germany out of it so they can control their own destiny, much like we want to do here in Alberta, removing ourselves from Confederation. Tamara Litch is going to be there as well. She's going to be performing with her band and sharing some of her story. And, there's a multitude of others. The Alberta Prosperity Project will be there. The Alberta Republican Party will be there. This is going to be an awesome independence rally, Alberta independence rally on July 1st, long weekend, coincidentally. So that should be fun. Oh, Cam's speechless. I knew this was going to happen. We're getting past 10 o'clock, so now we apparently run out of internet bandwidth or something. Maybe we're throttled. But I'll give Cam another couple minutes to come out of freeze frame. See if he pops back in. I think he did a pretty good job wrapping up what he believes this province should be anyhow. I really like what the guy has to say. And I really like this opportunity that Olds... Yeah, there he is. He's back. I really like the opportunity that Olds, Didsbury, Three Hills has right now to send a very strong message, not only to the people of Alberta, but a strong message to our government that, hey, Alberta is pursuing sovereignty, and either get on the train or get off the tracks, because we're going there.
Lead, follow, or get the hell out of the way.
Bingo. I agree. So unless you have anything else, Cam, I see that either your battery died or we're running out of internet again. So maybe we'll wrap it up and get some sleep and start a new week.
Sounds good. I've got an early morning tomorrow. We're starting the day in the northern part of the riding, and we got a lot of stops along the way. So looking forward to the last final stretch of the campaign. If your viewers want to help out, knock some doors, make some calls, drop off flyers, deliver lawn signs. We're still getting, I got a message earlier today, we had another request for about 100 and some lawn signs on private property. And so the momentum is growing. We're out there working hard. I think we've talked to a couple hundred volunteers in the last 2 weeks alone, most of them from the riding. And so the momentum is growing. Come join, be a part of the team. We're the political side of the movement. We're working hard to advance the cause of freedom and Alberta independence, and we'd love to have you on board. So if you're in Olds, make sure you vote. Voting starts on Tuesday, and encourage your friends and family and neighbors that live in the riding to vote for Alberta first.
Cam, where are you going to be Tuesday?
Tuesday, we're having a forum in Olds, and my understanding is that the UCP candidate has agreed to show up, and we're greatly looking forward to a debate of ideas and a positive vision for Alberta, and looking forward to that conversation on Tuesday night, and it will be live streamed. Yeah,
I'm going to do everything I can to get down there and participate in that. And I got to say, no matter what your political stripe is, it is awesome and can only yield good things for this province if people have discussions and actually debate their ideas thoughtfully. We stopped doing that. It didn't go very well, and if we start, we're going to change course. But Cam, I'm really looking forward to watching that debate, and I'll do everything I can to be there. So thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Chris, and good to chat with you again. And I appreciate all the questions from the audience. I'm sure, as you saw the other night, I enjoy taking as many questions as I can. So thank you again for having me on the show.
You're welcome. Have a great night. And again, happy Father's Day.
You as well.
Thanks. Well, there you have it. That was our follow-up interview with Cameron Davies, who is the leader of the Republican Party of Alberta. No, nothing to do with the 51st state. No, nothing to do with the United States. The party is named the Republican Party of Alberta because they believe that Alberta should be its own constitutional republic and chart our own course as an independent nation. Well, that was great. One thing that's been on my mind is I want to make sure that everybody watching, if you need to know this. I talk about political things. I ask questions. I interview people. Sometimes I'm hard on different candidates or parties or whatever. Sometimes I support them. These are all good people. There's this idea that some people have that all politicians are bad. Everyone's evil. They're all eating babies. They're all lizard people, whatever. They're all pushing a button in an airplane. Oh, it's a touchy subject. Sorry, I had to do it. But I know a lot of these people. I've become friends with them over the last few years, and that would have never happened if it wasn't for what happened to me in my restaurant. And so don't forget that. Every one of these people they're someone's mom, they're someone's daughter, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, father, whatever. They're people just like you and me. And I would say that the majority of them really do want things to be better. They really do want this province to be awesome. They just have different ideas on how to get there. And it doesn't make them a bad person. Even some of the NDP people who we like to make fun of and make fun of and make fun of again, they're good people. They just have different ideas. And in this day and age, we should be challenging the ideas, talking about the ideas, debating the ideas, and doing everything we can if we want to see the change based on our ideas to bring more people to our team by effectively communicating and articulating our thoughts and ideas to them. The attacks that you see politically, don't vote for this person because they're this or they're this or whatever, very counterproductive. You might have noticed, as I did, that Cam was very measured in his critiques of his opponents. I didn't hear him say anything negative about any people, just about policy, and I appreciated that. That's been missing out of politics. So there's my little spiel. Don't forget, everyone's people's too. They just might have different ideas than yours, and even if the idea is stupid, it's still their idea, and we should talk about it. Have a great night, everybody. Happy Father's Day to all you out there. Looking forward to the All Candidates Forum in Olds on Tuesday evening. I'm even looking more forward to Albertans Day, actually Albertans Weekend, June 27th to July 2nd. Coming up right away, free camping at the Whistle Stop Cafe in Muir, Alberta. We have a ton of vendors who we have just said, hey, we have space in the parking lot. And Chris just happened to do something ridiculous, like buy 6 horse shelters at today's lumber prices so that you have a spot to vend at. We have some guests coming, one from Germany, one from Holland. Can you guess who we have coming from Holland? I'll give you a hint. He's a really good cook, and he's almost as handsome as me. Yeah, you're right. So mark it on your calendars and come join us for a great weekend. Looking forward to seeing you all, and looking forward to cooking you breakfast tomorrow and maybe a hamburger. We'll stop cafe in Muir, Alberta. Good night, everybody. P.S. Yes, it is my cat.